Okay, it started. I'm going to mute.
All right. Yes. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing Paul Jones. And in some ways, he doesn't really need any introduction because he's quite well known among all of our groups, the environmental and nature groups within the county. And this will be actually Paul's fourth presentation for PECFN. Many of you will remember that his presentation on the winter birds of Prince Edward County, then he did Charwell Point, the birds of the South Shore, and the last one was about how to photograph birds. So this is something he does very well, and he's actually become famous in the county as an outstanding birder and photographer. So a quick intro, Paul's from Ottawa. He was introduced to birding at a very young age, and he's been a birder all his life. And now that he's retired, he, of course, spends most of his time devoted for birding and photographing birds and wildlife. His images have been used for educational and promotional purposes by PECFN, SSJI, and PEPO. They have also appeared in scientific articles and a variety of books and magazines. And of course, we're all familiar with his famous calendar. For the past 3 years, Paul has designed and produced a beautiful calendar of his bird photos as a fundraiser for PECFN, SSJI, and PETBO. He's been very generous to PECFN, and we are truly appreciative of all of the stuff he has done for us. When he retired a few years ago, he ended up in Long Point, and he's been a regular visitor to Prince Edward County over the years, and he immediately became involved when he retired with, of course, the Bird Observatory, where, as a volunteer, he can be seen doing the daily early morning bird census, and I mean very early, usually seen carrying his enormous, huge camera lens. That's how I always think of him. Another bit of quick intro about Paul. Him and his wife, Jody, actually have traveled extensively across Canada, but also to all kinds of birding locations around the world. And all of these pictures are documented on his Flickr account. So if you want to look at some amazing photographs, I encourage everyone to check out his Flickr account. Now, I guess I should pass it over to Paul. Since spring is just around the corner, he's going to speak to us about the spring birds of Prince Edward County, the birds that we will all be seeing very, very soon. So, Paul, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's always a miracle when I'm able to share the screen. I'm sure I am sharing the screen. You can confirm that. That's good.
Yes, you are.
Okay, so the spring birds of Prince Edward County, a presentation for the Prince Edward County field naturalists. And as we know from that wonderful introduction by me, Paul Jones, it's happening right now. And that's a Cape May warbler actually out at Point Peter from a few Mays back. Begin with a brief outline. What are we going to talk about? When I thought about this presentation, I thought about when exactly is spring? And I wasn't sure. There's various definitions, and we'll chat a little bit about that to sort of define the parameters. Once we've defined the parameters, we'll go through a month-by-month review, see how spring migration and spring unfolds for birds. A chat about some locations, a bit arbitrary, just some spots that I know, and if people have other suggestions that can come up, and I guess in the question and answer time, which we'll conclude with. So to begin, when is spring? There's sort of three definitions that I was mulling over. The first one is astronomical spring. And this is determined by the position of the Earth in relation to the sun. So it starts out with a vernal equinox. This is when the sun is moving north and hits the equator. And then ends in the summer solstice when the sun is the furthest north. So this is roughly March 21st to June 21st, which is pretty good science. But for me, at least, speaking on behalf of the birds, it doesn't quite reflect how the birds may approach the issue of spring. So there's another definition of spring, and that's meteorological spring, which is basically done, seasons are defined based on annual temperature cycles, which is a little bit more on point. For around here, obviously it would be different in the Southern Hemisphere. Spring is March, April, and May. And as I've said, this is more helpful, but it still fails to capture, I think, what happens with seasonal change in activity for birds. So when confronted with this conundrum, what did I do? I invented a concept, birdological spring. I came up with it, and for me, it reflects kind of a bird-centric definition of spring, one that'll help us to sort of better understand what's going on out there in nature. So what is birdological spring? It's the avian perspective. Starts when birds turn their minds and start considering raising a family. And this is indicated by birds singing, like this marsh wren down at Charwell Point. Nesting, like this cliff swallow out at Petbo. I generally don't take photos of bird nests. I don't want to disturb them, but these silly birds nest right above the main door at the Petbo building, so I figure that they've waived any concern about being photographed. Doesn't seem to bother them. They always successfully raise a lot of young every year. The other thing would be migrating. So birds heading north to the breeding areas, like these brant out at Point Peter a few Mays ago. A little asterix here. Doesn't apply to all birds because not all birds are migrating. Some are here all year and they still are important. So birdological spring, when do birds around here actually start turning their minds towards raising a family? Here we have a bird sitting in a tree. It's mid-January. The evening gloom is gathering and we hear hoo, 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 which of course is a vague resemblance to the call of the great horned owl. And this was out at Prince Edward Point. It's singing to its mate on a nest in mid-January. So back to our notion of birdological spring, when do they start these behaviors that indicate an interest in raising a family? We can push it back all the way into January, which is a bit unconventional, but that's when it's happening. And how long does this go for? Well, it's sunrise at Charwell Point. It's early June. And overhead we hear, boop, 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 boop. It's a flock of whimbrels coming in, maybe from as far away as South America or the Caribbean. They're coming across Lake Ontario at dawn and they're heading north on their way to their Arctic nesting grounds. So this interesting concept of spring runs January to June. And your reactions might be, huh? So let's take this apart and we'll look at it month by month. So I've talked about January, talked about some county birds that are already singing and nesting. Great horned owl is one. Northern ravens are probably on their nests. And there's other birds as well. You start to hear woodpeckers drumming a bit more rather than simply tapping, looking for food, but they're drumming on hollow branches, signaling their territories. So I would say spring is here now and it's been here at least a month. Bit hard to tell with all the blizzards and whatnot, but there you go. And the pace is quickening because we've burned through January. Now we're well into February, and February is actually almost over. The days are getting longer. The air is warmer. The sky is bluer. I don't know if any other folks notice that, but the sky always seems to get bluer the more we progress into the year. And singing is intensifying. Dale will know this. Mentioned the song, what cheer, what cheer, what cheer, what cheer, the Northern Cardinal. They've been singing around my house for at least a few weeks now, and that pace is picking up. So as singing intensifies, some of the other birds are singing around my place as well. Migration is also underway. And we had a bit of a discussion in the pre-part there about who's the first back. And American robin is always a popular candidate, thinking that it's the first sign of spring. They've been around all year. There's been a really good crop of eastern red cedar coneberries. And so there are hundreds of them down on Long Point. So it's a bit hard to tell which will be the spring arrivals. But there are big flocks of them around now, and they'll increase as more come in. For me, the sign of spring bird is the horned lark. Few of them are around all winter, but they start to pick up mid-February as they move back from the south. Really great bird. They like sitting on roads, unfortunately for them sometimes. You can see this one is on Wesley Acres Road, and it's feeding on spilt corn. Another sure sign of spring is when the red-winged blackbirds come back in numbers. A few hang around all winter, but they'll be pouring back soon, and they'll be everywhere. A warm night like or a warm day like today, and then tonight, they may be swamping us in the next couple of days. Some other early migrants, common grackle, will be here early March. Coming to your favorite McDonald's parking lot, the ring-billed gull. There's gulls around now. They're mostly herring gulls. The ring-billed gull will be the one that's coming in soon. And this is a winter plumage bird. You can see what they're called the bare parts. So the bill and the legs are quite pale, but they'll turn bright yellow. You'll notice those down at the Picton Marina. So where are we now? February 25th, March is almost here. So what happens? The pace, the spring pace quickens. If you're out in a wooded area at all, you could hear thump, 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 brrr, the drumming of the ruffed grouse. This one was a little bluff conservation area where the male had set up a little bandstand on a fallen log and did its performance and was able to, or allowed me to approach quite closely. Other birds that are back early to mid-March, the killdeer, you'll hear that kildee, kildee, kildee around farm areas or anywhere where there's some bare ground. So things are really picking up, but what happens? Inevitably, there's a cold snap or a snowstorm and migration freezes. And this seems to happen every spring. There's kind of a doldrum period. Here we are sitting around bemoaning the cold snap that shut down bird activity. And March can just seem to drag on and on and on with little change. We had that first wave of birds, maybe robins, redwings, killdeer, ring-billed gulls, grackles, but not much else happens until April. And when it finally arrives, the days continue to get longer, the air is warmer, sky even turns a richer blue, and something else very important happens. And here's a picture of it. But I'm not sure people know exactly what this is off the bat. I'm basically looking at my feet, pointing the camera straight down at the ground. What are they? Here's a closer look. And there's the super detail. It's bugs. These in particular are the famous, I guess it's all along Lake Ontario, the midges that the county is famous for. They're sitting on the ground getting ready to fly into my ears and my nose. They don't bite, but there's just millions and millions of them. And their return hails the return of the first insectivores, the first insect-eating birds. The hardiest come first, even in early to mid, well, late March, sometimes early to mid-April. One of the first ones back is the eastern phoebe. You can hear them around your edge of your roof looking for a place to nest, and they're going, phoebe, phoebe, which I guess is kind of a phoebe like sound. This was out on Traverse Lane in Prince Edward Point area. Another early bird that comes back to eat insects is the tree swallow. Kind of looks fairly delicate, but they're tough. This one actually wasn't photographed in the spring. This was last November out at the Traverse Lighthouse. So they're a tough bird. And they make a burbling sound, which I won't attempt to imitate, but it's quite rich and beautiful. Then what happens? And we'll need a drum roll for this, which I'm not going to do actually. The warblers start to appear. So it's mid-April. We've got over the doldrums. Stuff is starting to happen, starting to pick up. And we've all been waiting for warblers to come back. So one of the first one back is the pine warbler. You can see it here sitting in a white pine, as befits its name. One of the tools I like to look at to get a sense of what's going on is the eBird illustrated checklist for Prince Edward County. Here's a segment of it, a bar chart, showing all the months of, you can see them January, February, March, April, and then when the birds start to come. So nothing in March, but then by mid-April, the pine warblers start to show up. You can really see them there. At this time of year, something a little sad happens too, and that is that birds disappear. Not necessarily in a bad way, although they will be gone. This poor little guy or gal, these are our departing friends. This is an American tree sparrow out at Long Point, photographed in my backyard. You can see the range map from Cornell University. Here's where they winter, the blue area, and then they nest up north edge of the boreal forest towards the tree line. They start to leave mid-April, early May, and they're gone. It's not as obvious as when birds arrive, like when the first robin or something or redwing shows up, it's very, very obvious. These folks just kind of quietly slip away. And one day you notice that they're just not around anymore. They will be back next late fall, but it is something that happens that we don't always think about. There's a whole bunch of birds that come down from the north to winter in the county, and they start to head out April, sometimes even a bit earlier. Then May comes, and what happens in May? For me, at least, May is synonymous with spring birding. We've made it through March and even April, which sometimes can seem to drag a bit. But in May, the dam really bursts. We have warblers, flycatchers, thrushes, and other stuff on the move. As opposed to, getting a new bird every week or so, suddenly you're getting 2 or 3 new ones every day. They're everywhere, hopefully, like this blue-headed vireo at Traverse Woods. As May progresses, there comes around, birders are looking for a big event. They're looking for weather conditions that move birds north and drop them into the county. So there's typically kind of a trickle moving north. Sometimes it dies down when the north wind happens. But if the weather conditions align properly, there can be a huge fallout of birds, a mass arrival of new migrants, a big exciting moment. What are the triggers for this? Talk about the weather, wind and the weather. We're looking for south winds and warm temperatures that are pushing north, and the birds know that and will get behind that kind of weather. And then bumping in northern conditions over the county. So if we have nice warm weather coming up from the south, it's a cold front in the north. This can drop thousands, hundreds of thousands of birds down. 2 tools to look at, ones that I sort of organize my life around, are windy.com and then the Environmental Canada website. Windy.com is a great site. It charts sort of real-time wind conditions and also projects forward for a week or so what's going to happen, so you can watch systems as they come in and give you a sense. There it is. And here you can see those little white lines indicate the wind direction. So although this, I think I did a screen capture a couple of weeks ago, this would be very nice in May. You can see the winds coming up from the south, hopefully bearing southern migrants. And of course, good old Environment Canada and our beloved government. When might such a fallout occur? The main bird migration in spring is probably the first 2 weeks of May. And the peak would be around the 7th of May. It varies from year to year. If it's a very warm year, the peak may be the 1st or 2nd of May. If it's a cold year, birds may not start to move until, the 15th or on. But as a general rule, it's those first 2 weeks of May, a peak around the 7th. There's our Cape May warbler. It seems to be our mascot for this spring. The migration slows after the 14th, but migrants are still passing through until the end of the month. It's interesting about how birds decide whether to come north or not and when. Their habitat and their feeding desires may be similar, but some just don't come till later. And one example of that is the olive-sided flycatcher, which tends to be a migrant more in late May. Here's the bar chart from the eBird checklist. You can see it's really the second half of May where these ones are moving through into the first part of June. Another late migrant is the black-poll warbler. Again, the bar chart shows them moving through well into the first week of June. So remember that pine warbler is coming through in mid-April. The blackpolls aren't moving through until later in May. Then there's the last wave of spring migrants, which are one of my favorite groups of birds, shorebirds. So I've done a brief special featurette on them. So we've made it through most of May. The songbirds, the warblers are either gone or they're nesting. So the migration is coming to an end for those type of things. But the shorebirds now are the ones that start moving, at least the ones that nest up far to the north. And why is this? Why are they moving so late? Pretty simple answer. If we look up north to where they're nesting, this is Baffin Island in the high Arctic or the Arctic, early June, let's say June 6th. And you can see it's still frozen in. So whereas we may be out lounging by the pool drinking our margaritas on June 6th, up north it's still solidly frozen in. And this is where a lot of the shorebirds that pass through the county nest, way up there. This is a red phalarope from Baffin Island, again, early June. And you can see, while it may look very idyllic, it's a pretty harsh environment to try and find anything to eat. Here's the purple sandpiper. Again, we think of shorebirds as being birds of mudflats and shorelines, probing in the mud for food, picking at stuff on the beach. Not going to find any food up there in early June. Here's a closer look at a purple sandpiper, not too warm. So meanwhile, back in the county at this time, what's going on? Let's say June 1st, not May 1st, but the whole month since the main migration started. This is down at Charwell Point, and these are red knots. It's a bird that's not doing terribly well. I'm not sure what it's of special concern, but they're on the move and coming through the county. Here's the breeding range or the range of them, again from the Cornell University. You can see the wintering areas to the south, and then the breeding areas far, far to the north. And so when are they passing through? They don't want to get up there when it's still frozen. So they time their migration in that first week of June, mostly to get through, to get up to hospitable areas rather than a frozen wasteland. Here's an interesting red knot from last May. You can see it's got a color tag on it and also a transmitter wire. So it's beaming out signals. It came down at Charwell Point. I've tried to track down exactly what the story of this bird is. I haven't been able to find out for sure. It would be nice to be able to trace it from its southern breeding grounds or its southern wintering grounds to its northern areas, and where Charwell Point fit into that. But I haven't got the full information yet. When I will, I'll hopefully be able to share it. So that's the end of spring, those shorebirds moving through. You can see it starts in January maybe with great horned owls hooting, and then ends in June with the last of the shorebirds passing through north. Mid-June, as I said, the migrants have dwindled down to basically nothing, and birds actually start returning. So as soon as the last ones are going through, there's already ones coming back. An example is lesser yellowlegs, which doesn't breed terribly far north. It's not one of those high Arctic nesters. This one was out at Charwell Point, and it's hard to say. This is mid-June, so is it coming or going? If you look at that bar chart, you can see that whole month of June, they're always here, but it's hard to say whether they're leaving, they're on their way north or on their way south. But that pretty much signals the end of birdological spring. So to review, spring lasts January to June, all kinds of things happen. And where can we see this stuff happen? I've picked out some of my favorite locations in the county for birding. Obviously very popular places, somewhat personal to me. There's a whole bunch that I've left out as well, that I just don't know quite as well. And there's also time considerations as well. But these are some locations. maybe the most important one is your own neighborhood. Your backyard, up the street, any park or local woodlands. This is my house, and this was early May, and there's a rose-breasted grosbeak. This is out on Long Point. Because birds are passing through, things that you wouldn't otherwise see in the winter if they're southern birds, and then they don't nest in the county over the summer, so they're moving through, but they can appear in your yard during those first couple of weeks of May, or just down the road from you. So it's fun just to have your binoculars and wander around. I always make a point of not staring into people's windows. It's not very conducive to neighborliness, I guess. Moving a bit farther afield from your own place, Wesley Acres and Wesley Acres Road. Don't know, I guess most of you know where this is. Bloomfield, head west towards Wellington at that intersection, and then Wesley Acres Road heads south off that. Some tips. I guess the first one, I have to remind myself of this all the time, is drive very carefully on country roads. I spend as much time looking in the rearview mirror as I do out the window for birds. Especially on the roads where there's not a lot of traffic, you have to be careful because you can get your attention keyed into some bird and miss the fact that there's a truck zooming up behind you. So look in the rearview mirror a lot and never slam on the brakes. Right now, there's roadside birds. This is where I see the horned larks this time of year. And as the spring progresses, the fields will flood, and it can be a good place for waterfowl and for shorebirds as well sometimes. This is a horned lark from out at Wesley Acres Road. Another, well, I guess a locally famous spot is Kaiser Crossroads, or Kaiser Cross Road. It's out on Cressy, to the, I guess it's kind of the northeast of the county. And there it is there, cutting across CR7 to CR8. Tips, again, drive carefully. I find not a lot of traffic on Kaiser Crossroad, and you can get kind of engrossed in the surroundings, and then someone will zoom by. So I try to maintain situational awareness. As with Wesley Acres, there's roadside birds, horned larks, snow buntings right now. Some sparrows and stuff will show up. As the season progresses, and probably right now, very shortly, the fields will flood, and it brings in really good numbers of waterfowl, sometimes thousands and thousands of birds. These are photographed from my car on Kaiser Crossroad. A nice pair of blue-winged teal. Sometimes these birds will start moving in as early as mid-March, a few weeks from now. And if there's not much else happening, it's always nice to go out and take a look at the waterfowl this time of year. Other interesting things happen. Big flocks of Canada geese come down and can search through them carefully and pick out a different one. You can see that one right there. It's a greater white-fronted goose, which is pretty rare. So that's a exciting sighting on Kaiser Crossroad. Then, of course, the South Shore, our beloved South Shore, runs from Point Peter in the west over to Prince Edward Point in the east, and everywhere in between. There's lots of birding places, Charwell Point, Ostrander Road, all kinds of places to look for stuff. I don't have unlimited time, and as much as I love the sound of my own voice, I won't inflict it on you too much longer. So I'm going to concentrate on Point Peter and then Prince Edward Point. So Point Peter, down on the southwest corner, reach it up County Road 24, then onto Point Peter Road, pretty easy to find. Head right down to the bottom. Some tips here. I'm going to stress this again and again, is arrive early. I try to get to places right at sunrise, which can be a bit ridiculous in May, like you're talking 4:30 or thereabouts, which is hard to drag yourself out of bed sometime. But it's worth it to get down there early, see what's happening bird-wise. Stay off the private property. And I guess it's not really private property, we own it, but it is no trespassing. The Department of National Defense on the east side of the road has a big radio array that it talks to its airplanes with. and you do not want to go into there. And then down at the southwest tip, I don't know if it's Environment Canada or the Coast Guard, or the two of them have fenced off some areas for a lighthouse and some weather station stuff. So if you stay out of there, that's the polite thing to do. You still can walk the roads and trails. You could idea to have high rubber boots. It gets wet down there. And there's lots of public access. You can check the grasslands to the east just by looking over the fence to the D&D land. And then to the west, you can go down to the shore, and the shore to the south as well. And it can be a really good place for bird migration. Not quite as stellar as Prince Edward Point, but a nice place to check. During COVID, when Prince Edward Point was shut down, I spent a lot of time birding at Point Peter. Right along the fencing separating us from the D&D property, there's a big colony of grasshopper sparrow, a neat little bird. You can see them there. So that's Point Peter. Then we head over to the east to Prince Edward Point and the Prince Edward Point National Wildlife Area. Can focus on a couple areas in particular within this land: Traverse Woods and Prince Edward Point itself. Here's Traverse Woods. Some tips. Look for the big yellow tick sign. You heading east on Long Point Road, the road curves. It's kind of a small parking area. And a series of trails that run in there. If you know where it is, obviously, and probably most of you do, it's not news, but folks have trouble finding it. So I always say, look for the big yellow tick sign that advertises the dangers of Lyme disease and ticks. Again, arrive early. Circle the trails. It's about 1.5 kilometers, maybe, of beautifully maintained trails. My approach is just to walk around and see what I can see. There's typically lots of other birders there in May, and super friendly crew. It's almost the Traverse Woods gang, and they'll tell you what's happening and where you can see stuff, and they've gotten me onto some great birds. And then stay. Like early, I was sort of tempted to go in there, do a quick half an hour zip in and out. But what I found over time is that right at dawn, it may not be that lively. But then as the sun rises, birds start dropping down out of the sky, coming over the lake. So between an hour after sunrise, as late as 9:30 or 10, birds will continue to arrive, and sometimes in spectacular fashion. When you arrive there first, there's nothing, and then the birds just start swarming everywhere. So big flocks of warblers, vireos, thrushes. Really neat place. Here's a bird I found in Traverse Woods. This is a summer tanager, a young male bird. Quite an unusual one. You can see here's the range map from Cornell University. A neotropic bird, a neotropic migrant. So it winters down south, then heads north in the spring. And you can see its breeding range here. And what you'll notice is, does not breed around here at all. So this is kind of a category of birds that people call, or birders in Ontario call, southern overshoots. So they've got just overly enthusiastic about their migration. Maybe they really caught a good breeze from the south. They're flying at night and they just keep going. And they far outfly their breeding range, end up in Prince Edward County, Prince Edward Point. So the rare bird alert goes out, and hopefully as many people as possible can see it. So that's Traverse Woods. The area around Prince Edward Point, a bunch of different sort of sub areas. There's the beach loop with the shore road. There's the harbor and the swamp. These are quite poetic names. The lighthouse, it's a bit better. And then you can access parts of the South Shore as well. Tips again, yeah, arrive early. Walk Traverse Lane. Traverse Lane sort of runs like a main circuit cable right through the heart of Prince Edward Point. You can follow it from the shore loop past the banding station, along the harbor, past the swamp, and then out to the lighthouse. You know, take a couple hours to make that stroll. Sometimes there won't be a whole lot around, but there can be days in May when it's hard to make any progress at all because the stuff is swarming so much. So you're looking in the trees and the shrubs. Also keep your eyes on the sky. Interesting things can fly over. There've been black vultures seen there, quite a rare bird. And if you're really fortunate, you might see a kite, either a Mississippi kite or a swallowtail kite, which have occurred sometimes in May. Here's an interesting bird. This was out at the lighthouse. We look at it, we know it's a warbler. It's got a yellow throat. So it is a yellow-throated warbler, and this was right near the Point Traverse Lighthouse. Again, this is a southern overshoot. We can take a look at the range map. See its wintering areas down mostly in Central America. Breeding range takes it a little bit close to Canada, but really nowhere near, not that near where we are. So again, an exciting moment. Now, then, this bird has heard about the concept of southern overshoots and is interested that people think a yellow-throated warbler is a southern overshoot. We look at it, we're pretty sure it's a cormorant, but there's something a bit different about it. And there's that little white V right around the base of the bill. And also it's smaller than our typical double-crested cormorant. So with our hearts pounding, we realize that this is a neotropic cormorant. At the harbor, this was a few Mays back. And it is saying, southern overshoot, hold my beer, because here's the range of the neotropic cormorant. You can see mostly it's a South American bird. And then it barely pushes outside of Texas. You can see they don't even bother showing much of Canada because it just doesn't come anywhere near here, except for Prince Edward Point, underlining what a interesting place it is, and its geography funnels and attracts birds, so it's fantastic. A real southern overshoot. So to review, spring is a long parade passing by our eyes and ears, January to June. Each month brings exciting changes, all sorts of stuff happening. I try and enjoy the whole of it and its parts as a birder or a lister. Sometimes I get a bit focused on finding new species, finding rare birds, seeing the first one of the year. But I try not to avoid this spectacular thing that's happening in this whole movement of nature across Eastern North America. You know, millions of birds flying through, flying overhead, starting their families, fighting sometimes difficult battles for survival. And we're really fortunate to be blessed with an amazing area, an amazing location to witness this. Underlying our good fortune, but also the importance of the work that is being done to protect these areas. So that is my presentation on the spring birds of Prince Edward County. If people have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Before I do that, just one other thing. The Millennium Trail at Slab Creek is the location that everyone or a lot of folks knew about. I didn't discover it this year, so I want to add it to the mentionable locations. Out by Hillier off the Loyalist Parkway. I think it's Station Road, heads up. There's a very nice parking lot and a really incredible wetland area where there's lots of interesting birds, common gal and the wildebeest bitter and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so that's it. If there's questions, I'm happy to make an effort to answer them.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and now I'm like panicked about how to stop.
Oh, you stop sharing? That's perfect. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to turn back on my video. That was a terrific talk. I've got that in my mind. Birdological spring. Very good. Thanks a lot. So now the whole format is very different than it used to be. So I'm going to look at the messages here for chat. So first of all, if people can put in your questions for Paul through the chat function, that would be great. So I'm going to open up, got some comments already, but I think I'd like to start with a question before I start reading them. So you had that picture of the doldrums, which was not one of your photographs. And now I want to know what bird was in that picture.
Well, I think it's a woodcut or a copper etching from the Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Oh yeah?
Coleridge poem, and I think that's an albatross.
Okay, it almost looked like an auk to me, so I was wondering. That's amazing.
I think it was an
Okay.
albatross, but it captured the bleakness, I think, of
Right.
in March when you're all excited because the birds are back and the birds are singing, and then croci are poking through the snow, and then suddenly boom, and everything shuts down. And I find it kind of frustrating and a bit depressing. But we know that real spring will be arriving at some point.
It's great. Thank you, Paul. That was just a terrific talk. And anyway, so I'll start reading the comments. Please, people, put in your questions. So the first comment that I have on my screen here is from Adair. Thank you, Paul, for the enlightening presentation with gorgeous photographs. Absolutely.
You're so welcome.
Did you take all of them?
Yes.
Wow.
Interestingly,
Okay.
I don't have a great selection of spring photographs because my attention turns more to birding. So mostly I'm working with binoculars in the spring, trying to record bird species. And I don't put as much an emphasis on trying to track down and photograph birds. Photographing birds is tricky. I mean, maybe especially for me. And it's hard to bird watch and bird photograph at the same time. So I don't have a lot of warbler pictures. And I felt kind of badly about that. So I had to sort of gear my presentation to around photographs that I did have, or I do have.
So you did take those photographs in the Arctic as well, huh?
Yeah, there was an amazing trip we made to Pond Inlet up on Baffin Island. It was a venture to the floe edge. And that first picture was our encampment on the ice, and really an extraordinary time up there. And it was interesting to see these birds. Like, you realize it's frozen up there well into June. And as I pointed out, that's why the shorebirds aren't coming through until late in May or early June.
Mm-hmm. It's great. Makes me think differently about the blackpoll too, which is really great.
Well, the blackpoll is an interesting bird. I was going to have a male, and I know everyone appreciated my incredible bird imitation calls, but the blackpoll, the song is a series of really high pitched kind of hisses. So it goes. But I think every year as we get older, we hear fewer and fewer of them because the higher frequencies at the outer edge drop off. So I don't know, when I was like 15, maybe the song went on for 10 seconds, but now I can hear maybe. So they're dying away. They also make an incredible flight. They breed as far north as coastal northwestern Alaska. So they come through, and they're also thought to launch themselves off the East Coast and fly all the way to Brazil. And so these are a bird, maybe weighs the same amount as a toonie or so. And they make this incredible migration. And they do drop down in the county on their way to the boreal forest and beyond. And that's a bird in June. You can hear them singing, like probably downtown Picton. The cemetery would be a great place. As you hear that high-pitched, thin, lisping call, and the blackpoll warblers are moving through.
It's amazing. Thank you, Paul. Okay, we have another comment from Pamela. Numbers of waterfowl have dropped significantly now that bald eagles are nesting in the area and making regular hunting trips over Kaiser. And we found that out. So she's talking about Kaiser Crossroads in the spring, because we actually had a PECFN outing there last spring, and we're a little disappointed. But I have to say that over on Wesley Acres Road at the Rose Farm, there were tons of birds. So that was kind of interesting in the flooded fields there.
Yeah, I don't know what is going on with bird populations. I'm not a scientist or a biologist. And the interaction with eagles is interesting. They out on Long Point, it freezes and unfreezes. And when it freezes, the ducks go into a panic because they start getting blocked into the ice. And that's when the eagles come out and just have a field day and really massacre the ducks. But on the other hand, you look out there on some days and it looks like there's a huge smoke fire on the horizon because there's maybe 5,000 to 10,000 ducks swirling around. The other thing is, I've heard, and this is very sad, is that they're having to euthanize some bald eagles in areas because they have bird flu.
Oh.
And they're no longer able to
Fun
move. So
story
maybe the
about-
ducks get their revenge as well. Because what I've read is the ducks are pretty immune or have a strong immunity or resistance to bird flu. And the eagles maybe don't as much and are either catch the ducks directly or feed on carrion and run into some problems. So it's an interesting dynamic that I don't fully understand, but I guess we can celebrate that there are bald eagles nesting in the county, even if the ducks aren't so happy.
Okay, great, thanks. And now we have a comment from Lois. Great presentation. That's a comment. So, okay, now we've got a question from Jerry. You mentioned seeing a black vulture at the point, I think. Do you think we may see more of them and perhaps see them breeding up here?
Yes, and yes. With climate change, a lot of stuff is moving north. Black vultures seem to be well ensconced around Niagara now, and they're starting to drift over this way. So yeah, I think we will see more of them. I'm looking forward to seeing one this spring. Typically, there's one or two pass over, and then maybe in a decade or so, we'll have them breeding. Which more vultures, yay!
Wow. So looking through here, any other questions from people? Because that's it that I have on the chat here. People can raise their hands if you want to.
Well, I would just urge everyone to check out the PECFN Bird Festival. I think towards that end of the first week of May, to see a lot of these things, to see the bird banding operation up close, and to really enjoy Traverse Woods and Prince Edward Point.
Yep. Oh, Gordon, you have to unmute. Oops, we're still not hearing you. Can you try that again? Uh-oh. Maybe I need to unmute you. Let me see. No?
Do you have me now? Yeah.
Yes, now we have
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Sorry, wrong microphone enabled.
Okay.
Yeah, my question was, Paul, I've noticed like that they've been making efforts to drain the fields down at Wesley Acres and Kaiser Crossroad as well. Do you know what's going on there at all?
No, I don't know what's going on. I find it personally disappointing, but I also understand completely that farmers need to make a living, and bringing land
Yeah.
into production is important. I've heard various things over the years, but I won't repeat them. Not that they're terrible things, but just that I don't know exactly what's going on. It'd be nice if there was some way of keeping the water in those places. I know the one on Wesley Acres was extraordinary last spring, or the spring before, and then they drained it out, and there wasn't much happening there this year. So I know in some places they pay farmers vast amounts of money to keep areas flooded. I don't know if there's programs like that in Ontario.
So Paul, there is a comment from Pamela here in relation to that. There is now a permanent drain at Kaiser, and it is drained much earlier, before the shorebirds arrive.
Yeah, I see it happen. Like it's incredible for waterfowl, and then the water just is gone. Like they pump it out, and again, I know. Then they put corn or soybeans in, and that's how they make their money. I don't know if there's a way that they could compensate sort of dollar for dollar for soybean production versus keeping the water in there. But I know that there was one year where there was an incredible shorebird collection at Wesley at Kaiser, and then I just haven't seen that recently.
Anyone else want to ask a question? You can do it by hand if you want to, because I think I can see the whole screen. Anyone else?
Well, I think my presentation was so comprehensive that there's just
I know.
nothing left to wonder.
It was amazing, Paul. Really great.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So, thanks.
Tammy, if I could just ask, Paul, will you be leading a guided tour during the spring birding festival?
Yes.
Good.
There as a bird auction person, I'm leading it. There was a fundraising tour I'm leading. I'm also going to try to sign up to lead some of the PECFN birding festival walks, although that'll be
Yeah,
nice. I
that's
also,
what I was thinking.
I'm going to try to do the Pedalo's bird census as part of the sort of the more scientific stuff, so and work out finding a free day there. But just to, you know, to walk with people for a couple of hours around Traverse Woods would be a lot of fun.
I was in your group last year, or one of your groups last year, and
Okay.
it was absolutely outstanding. It was what amazed me is how you could pick up bird sounds, like the calls or the songs, before we saw anything. And it was so if you get a chance to go with Paul on one of his walks during the Spring Birding Festival, absolutely sign up for it. It's spectacular.
Well, it's super fun to share the information, and there's a lot of stuff I take for granted. Like I don't know if everyone realizes this, the birders and bird watchers well, but a lot of bird watching, maybe 70–80% of it is done by ear. You don't see things, you just hear them, songs and chips and whatnot. And I devoted my life to learning them all. And now there's technology. I don't know if people have the Merlin app.
Yeah.
But you just hold it up and it's extraordinary. And it can sift through all the noises that are coming in and tell you what you hear singing. And it's not perfect, but it has an incredible degree of accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
So if people are interested, check out the Merlin app, MERLIN.
So may I jump in here for a minute? I have to say that I've gone birding with you before, Paul, which has been just wonderful. And there are other birders here like Peter Fuller, who I can actually be talking to while we're birding, and they hear a bird at the same time as listening to me, which I always find really amazing. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
Well, if you're with some hyper keen birder and they stop suddenly and start staring into the middle distance, it's not because they're having in a trance, but it's because they hear a hooded warbler or something singing off in the brush.
Yeah. So I wanted to make a comment, and that's that, having watched you do your, last year you did the bird photography lecture, your presentation, which is up on the SSJI YouTube. And it was really amazing to listen to this talk today, but also bear that one in mind, to listen to, just think about all the work you do into every single photograph that's up there and noticing every single feather and all of that. I just wanted you to know that it was really neat to have somebody who's presented it a couple of times and be able to put sort of that memory onto what you were doing today. So that's terrific, Paul.
I'm glad you enjoyed that. And I want to give a shout out to Ron Irwin's talk. I mean, I'm not a bad photographer, but he's just the next level extraordinary. So whatever his presentation is going to be, it's going to be fantastic. So I urge people to tune into that.
You'll also be happy to know that Ron is bringing his own projector to the Bloomfield Hall, because we all know Bloomfield Hall projectors are a little lacking in focus and color and just about.
Otherwise, though, it's good. Otherwise, it's good.
Yeah, otherwise it's great.
Amy and John's 22-year-old projector needs a new bulb, and we don't even know if we can replace it. Just you know that. Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Paul. We all enjoy your presentation so much. As Amy said, your photographs are astoundingly good. And I remember you talking about cropping them, and bird probably shouldn't be right in the center because it's much more interesting if it's off to the side, and lots of details like that. And your presentations are always so well organized and clear, and
funny.
Funny, yeah. So thank you from all of us, and we hope we can call on you again next year. And thanks for birdology. I think we need to get that term out there.
Okay.
Okay, wait a minute. May I say one more thing about your talks too, Paul? Sorry to interrupt you, Jerry. But I think you gave your first PowerPoint presentation to PECFN. Is that true?
Yeah.
And you had to figure out the technology, which is really amazing. All of those circles that go around and stuff like that. So that was really amazing. And that one's also on the SSJI YouTube, just putting that out there. Good.
So thanks once again, Paul, and we will make sure we get a gift to you. Amy will deliver that. and we hope that you'll be able to present to us next year. I'd just like to point out or remind everyone that Terry Sprague will be presenting on learning to love frogs on March the 25th, again over Zoom. So we'll be sending out the poster and the link for that soon. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. It was great to see all those friendly faces. And until next time.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry. Outstanding. Outstanding, Paul. Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Paul.
Absolutely outstanding. Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Excellent.
Night,
Thanks a
everyone.
lot. Take care.